Hey, Clemson family, time to talk about what Tigers quarterback DJ Uiagalelei needs to do to keep the starting job in his hands.
I'm Daniel Shirley. I can't wait to talk about Adam Randall and what Dabo wants to see out of the Tigers against Louisiana Tech this weekend.
I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to episode 24 of the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. We want to be your source for analysis of Clemson sports in 2022. We appreciate everyone who's subscribed and commented at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. Keep it up. Follow us on the major podcast apps. We're easy to find. Vote in our polls at twitter.com/Clemson Kickoff. That's how we got today's lead topic. Go ahead and listen via our homepage as well, clemsonkickoff.com. We've got some other great resources there as well. Well, first, let's get into what people want to hear about, and that is keys to DJ Uiagalelei keeping the starting quarterback job over true freshman Cade Klubnik. And to me, the key is pretty simple at this point. Don't regress from that good 60, maybe even 75 minutes that we talked about previously, primarily that second half against Georgia Tech, and then his performance rolling into that first half against Furman last week.
I don't know that if you watched the second half against Georgia Tech and then the first half against Furman, how somebody could say he hasn't improved. I really don't know why somebody could say that or how they could say that. Big step forward for DJ, at least in my mind, and then we'll see if he can continue that going forward.
We did add up a few numbers. We'll call it the middle 60 minutes of the season to date so far. 55 points from halftime against Georgia Tech to halftime against Furman. 8 scoring drives pulled those points together, and then 502 yards of total team offense. Now, I get it. DJ didn't look good in that first quarter at all against Georgia Tech. A lot of factors went into that. It wasn't just him, but he individually also did not look good. And then people are questioning the level of competition that happened against, right? Georgia Tech, not known for its defense, lost a key defender, edge rusher, linebacker type out of that game to a targeting call. Clemson got rolling after that. And then obviously Furman, an FCS opponent, probably not the easiest of FCS opponents, but the level speaks for itself. If you're trying to contend for a playoff spot in Division I football, you've got to look good against Furman. So that's more what's expected than, oh my gosh, how great was that?
I think so. And I understand that stuff. I understand questioning the level of competition, what Georgia Tech is. I don't think we know what Georgia Tech is. We'll find out these next couple of weeks when it plays Ole Miss and UCF. Furman is an FCS program, like you said, fewer scholarships, 63 scholarships versus 85. But Furman's a pretty good football team. And I thought DJ played well in that first half. He was crisp. He threw the ball pretty well. Not perfect, certainly not what we've seen from him before, but I saw a big improvement from him in that first half Saturday. He looked a little more comfortable. He looked a little bit more at ease in the pocket. That is a huge step forward for me in my mind. Let's hope he can continue that this week against Louisiana Tech.
Clemson offensive coordinator Brandon Streeter talked this week about seeing the confidence growing on the Clemson offense. Here's a little clip from that interview thanks to TigerNet.com.
He is definitely gaining that confidence and playing faster and just confidence in the guys that he's playing around. And so that's a big positive for us.
Well, you can see that whole interview at TigerNet.com or on their YouTube channel. There is a potential source of added confidence, not only building on that during the play against Louisiana Tech, but wide receiver Adam Randall, highly lauded true freshman out of the Myrtle Beach area, is ready for prime time and is expected to hit the field this week. Some beat reporters even say they would start Randall this week.
I don't know if I would go that far. I haven't seen him play a snap, but I'm really excited to see Adam play. I've heard good things about him in practice, and we heard good things about him in the spring before he got hurt. And it's amazing that he's to this point of playing after tearing his ACL. But if you've seen the clips of him at practice, there was one out on the Clemson Twitter feed this morning. He does still have the big knee brace on. And I think typically what they've done is make the players wear those braces until they're a year out. All the reports have been good. And I'm as excited to see him play this season, I think, as anybody on the roster.
Just the size he has, the natural ability that he brings to the table really caught the eye of a lot of people who saw him in practice this spring before the injury. I think they're kind of looking for their bell cow, their alpha dog in that receiver core. I think right now it's Bo Collins. I think if he is a number 2 to Bo Collins right out of the gate this week against Louisiana Tech or against Wake Forest or against NC State, that's going to be a big deal, right? But if he is truly their number 1 target at that point, Antonio Williams also growing into his own, you might see a little bit of renewed claim to wide receiver use status if the rest of the group can be lifted around Randall as well. He can't be the lone savior, though.
No, and I don't think he is. But if he's there, maybe that slides somebody down a slot, and that creates more depth, certainly adds more talent to the room, and it makes the entire group better. And that's what I'm looking for out of this, Bill. I don't know how many balls he's going to catch. I don't know how many targets he's going to get, all those kinds of things. I would hope that you just throw the ball to the open guy, right? Whoever that is. I don't like forcing the ball to one receiver or another. Just when whoever's open, the ball will find them. But everything we're hearing about him is this young man is special. He's going to be a terrific player, and I just can't wait to see what he can do on Saturday.
Well, relating that to the conversation about Uiagalelei keeping the starting job, certainly adding another weapon at this point in time only helps his cause, only helps him feel a little better, be in the hub of that confidence that's growing throughout the offense, like Coach Streeter talked about. You can't expect perfection out of him, and I wouldn't want Clemson to just try to go out and steamroll Louisiana Tech for the sake of steamrolling Louisiana Tech. I think Dabo Swinney wants to prepare all aspects of the offense because he knows Wake Forest, NC State, like I mentioned, are going to be tough contests. Right after Boston College, you've also got Florida State and then Syracuse before you hit the bye week. So a lot to work on in this game. You hope that all those factors come together and help Uiagalelei further cement his hold on the starting job, quiet the critics that are out there, quiet the what ifs that are in part of the media nationally, and help that offense settle into a groove and be prepared to take on 2 major opponents, probably the 2 primary challengers along with Clemson for the ACC Atlantic title this year.
When you play better, Bill, you get more confidence, and then you play even better. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a confident group that plays fast and is efficient and moves the ball and has some explosive plays. All the things that we've seen out of the Clemson offense for a decade, you'd like to see more of that coming up this week and into that Wake Forest game and then and beyond the rest of the season.
We're joined now by the Clemson Tigers beat writer for the Charleston Post and Courier newspaper and website, Jon Blau. Jon, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So what have you seen these first couple of weeks that has jumped out at you, maybe compared to last year, as far as the Tigers' performance on the field?
It really colors things, that Furman game. Last year you would say it was very up and down offensively. The defense was championship level. It was kind of the opposite to a certain extent. In the Furman game, I mean, the defense had a really down performance. The offense still has moments where they stall out at times, but I mean, obviously we're able to score touchdown drives in 5 out of the first 6, and DJ led all 5 of those drives. And so you're seeing incremental improvement from DJ. I think that's positive in terms of the first 2 games. Definitely the Georgia Tech game was a little slow to start, and then kind of picked it up from there as far as DJ is concerned. But defensively, that was a bizarre, I would say was the word, outing from that unit. And so makes things really interesting. I mean, as we come forward out of these 2 games, I mean, really trying to figure out what this team is. And Louisiana Tech will give us some ideas, I think.
It's been real interesting to see Dabo Swinney's reaction to that game, at least from afar. What's it been like up close, being in those pressers or attending them online and sort of seeing things unfold as he looks at what happened against Furman and how he wants to straighten things out moving forward?
Yeah, Dabo Swinney is a guy who is pretty optimistic most of the time. I mean, sometimes to a fault, you wonder, when he's really playing up a unit or a player, what he really thinks at the end of the day. But when it came to the defense after that game, I mean, it was very interesting to hear him say how poor he thought they really played. I think the phrase was that they never left the Hilton Garden Inn. They never arrived for the game at Memorial Stadium. And so yeah, he was very, very honest. And then, I think I asked specifically about the secondary because that is a lesser in terms of experience unit on that defense. Obviously, the front seven's got a ton of returning players, ton of talent, but asked about the secondary. He said, well, I thought Georgia Tech was great, and the Furman game was terrible. And so he really was not afraid to call out kind of some of the deficiencies that they had. Obviously, the screen game was a huge issue. Everybody could see that with their own eyes. But also just getting beat man to man, one-on-one in coverage, just losing leverage, things like that. And then the main thing is the effort piece. I mean, he was talking about mental Mondays and how he goes through the tape trying to find loafs. And he found more than a few coming out of this Furman game. Just too many times where guys weren't giving what he would consider maximum effort. Mentioned Miles Murphy by name. I don't know if that was trying to call out Miles in particular, but wasn't afraid to put a name out there even and say, Miles Murphy knows what a loaf is. If he doesn't, he's going to find out on Monday. And then if you got any pride to you, I think is what he said, you go out there and you'll respond. And so, yeah, I mean, Dabo is pretty much calling out his defense. He wants them to respond, and we're going to see against Louisiana Tech if they've got that response in them.
And looking at Louisiana Tech, they certainly have the offensive ability to exploit some things, at least as much as Furman or as Georgia Tech would. So maybe some of those defensive linemen who Wes Goodwin talked about being sort of an over pursuit or too aggressive, Barrett Carter talked about that as well. Maybe they need to find that middle ground, and then the rest of the defense needs to lift that effort up and really show what they're capable of.
Yeah, I mean, at Louisiana Tech, they put up 52 points on Stephen F. Austin. And again, that's not a very high level of competition, but you were just playing Furman. And you gave up 12 points, but you also gave up 10 of 18 on third downs, which, again, compared to the 2 of 16 you gave up against Georgia Tech, is just an astounding number. So Louisiana Tech is more than capable of repeating that. If you're not ready with that air raid system, Sonny Cumbie obviously came from Texas Tech as a quarterback, then offensive coordinator. They know a lot about scoring points. If you know anything about Texas Tech, they put the ball in the air, they score points. So that's what Louisiana Tech's going to be trying to do. And yeah, it starts up front, obviously, like it always does in the game of football. I think they ran for about 200 yards, Louisiana Tech, last week as well. So it's going to be an interesting thing to focus on that defensive line, see if they can find that balance between, getting off the edge, getting upfield, pressure on the quarterback, which you want to do, but also having discipline about you, being able to stop the run and not get beat on some of those screens and some of those quick passes. Because if Furman could do it, they absolutely put a template out there for other teams to see. And I'm sure that Furman tape piqued Louisiana Tech's interest. If they have any screen games or quick game concepts in their playbook, I think they're going to be not very shy about using them on Saturday.
And then looking ahead, you've got Wake Forest following up. I know they like to use a lot of that slow mesh, but they've got time to maybe work a few things into their game plan if they want to. You've got NC State right on the heels of that, Devin Leary with a lot of new talent around him. And then even beyond that, Florida State looks like a tougher opponent than you would have guessed in the preseason. Syracuse might even turn out to be a tougher opponent than we expected in the preseason. So really about setting the tone in some ways and laying a groundwork for future success as well.
Yeah, I mean, this Louisiana Tech game, again, when the schedule came out, I don't think you looked at this one and thought it was going to be that important. The Furman game as well, but again, the way they played in that Furman game, you want to feel a little bit better about things and kind of how you've established, obviously on the defensive side of the ball, where there's been a ton of talent. It's been well documented, the kind of talent they have. And then offensively, when they played Wake Forest last year, I mean, that was a blowout. They win, what was it, 48-27. That was later in the season. That was when Clemson offensively had kind of gelled as an offensive line, was able to get the run game going. DJ Uiagalelei was able to hit some deep passes. I mean, I remember a couple in particular with Bo Collins. They were really they ramped up to that point. You don't feel incredibly comfortable, I would say, with the way they played against Furman. And then if you have another down performance against Louisiana Tech, rolling into the ACC the meat of that ACC schedule, starting with Wake Forest, because that is a team that can definitely put up points. Sam Hartman is a veteran quarterback. Obviously, that slow mesh, like you were mentioning, I don't know if it's a great matchup for some of the bodies that Clemson has on the inside, especially if Tyler Davis is healthy. Obviously, if Brian Bresee is available or not, obviously that's a little bit up in the air. But Clemson has to show that they're a little more crisp on both sides of the ball heading into this one and coming out of it. Obviously, I talked about the offense and DJ Uiagalelei playing well, but the offensive line still has some meshing to do. That's been evident as well. So, yeah, just a very, very important game to see how they kind of clean some things up and kind of go into an ACC schedule, like you said, with Wake Forest, NC State, Miami down the road, some of these programs that could definitely beat you if you're not ready.
You mentioned Brian Bresee, and of course the sad news that broke today as we're recording this Thursday, his younger sister Ella passing away could affect his availability. A lot of players jumping onto Twitter, supportive messages for him, and so our hearts go out to Bresee family and condolences to family and the players. Looking at the football aspect of it, I know there was some player availability after the game Saturday. I haven't seen a whole lot out there during the week. Is there any sense you're getting of the mood of the room? Obviously, a lot of emotions running high, but as far as what they expect to try to do this week on the field and moving forward for the season, what are you hearing? What are you picking up on?
So, yeah, we had availability through the week, and even on Monday, DJ Uiagalelei, the quarterback, was wearing his Ella Strong T-shirt. He was asked about supporting Brian Bresee, who's actually one of his best friends, a roommate, and he even seemed a little choked up talking about it just in terms of the situation they were in. And I think everybody in the program had a sense, obviously, that Ella was in a fight for her life at that point. And that's just a reminder, again, with what DJ was talking about, and then also just all the tweets you saw on Thursday after Ella unfortunately passed away was, these are people too. We're not watching robots out there playing this game. These are people with families, right, friends, and they all saw Ella about a week ago. She spoke to the team. There was a picture that was one of the ones that really struck me from Ashley Spires, who's the executive assistant of Dabo Sweeney, and she had a picture of Ella locking arms with Dabo to her right and Dominique Thomas, the running back, to her left. Dominique Thomas is an interesting story in himself. lost a bunch of family members in a tornado. Was a walk-on who came over from Union College, is now on scholarship. Dominique was to her left, locking arms with her. And so they just heard her speak about a week ago, obviously going to that Furman game. Know she's in a fight for her life and, wearing those shirts. And then, a few days later, she's gone. Just an outpouring of, hashtag Ella Strong, and Trey Williams, the defensive tackle, talking about how she's one of the strongest people he's ever met. And this is a guy who's been through a ton of injuries, who, has been through things as a football player, but obviously they pale in comparison to what Ella Bresee was going through and what Brian and his family have been going through. So it is an interesting dynamic going into another game, having just suffered this loss of sorts. But it does seem like, obviously, they're rallying around Brian, whether Brian's able to play or not. Dabo Sweeney said, I could care less. He's with his family, he's doing what he needs to do, but where their hearts are, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they respond after such an emotional kind of week. And then just, football wise, just in general, after that Furman game, which was not the kind of performance a top 5 team wants to have against an FCS opponent, how they come out in this game against Louisiana Tech, a night game. I guess, again, these things pale in comparison, don't even feel important, what I was just talking about. But Louisiana Tech with all the new video board and the ribbon boards and the way they can light up that stadium and some of the environment stuff they're going to be able to do, they're going to unveil some of that. It's going to be a lot going on, I guess, more or less is what I would say. And How do you respond to the football aspect? How do you respond to the emotional aspect? A night game, prime time. Again, looking at the schedule, you probably weren't looking at this Louisiana Tech game as being that, important in the arc of the season, but it actually is a very, very interesting game just with everything that's going on, how this team will play and perform on Saturday night.
Yeah, tough enough for us to maybe compartmentalize from the outside looking in. I can only imagine what's going on in that locker room as they're trying to prepare and focus and get things ready. And we did talk about some of the things that they do need to work on. Maybe it's less about the X's and O's of this week as it is kind of getting their feet under them to get ready to move forward through the rest of the season, however best they can.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, like I was talking about, it kind of feels like they're taking the ramp onto like the major part of their season, their schedule, Wake Forest, NC State back to back. And then really again, their goal is to get back on top of the ACC. Again, talking about last year and how this leads into this year. They were really humbled last year by having those few losses. Obviously, again, being 10-3 for most programs is not a bad season, but at Clemson that is. And if we're honest about it, I mean, there were just a ton of close games. I mean, they could have lost the Georgia Tech game, could have lost the Florida State game, could have lost Louisville, could have lost a bunch of games. And they're really trying to reestablish themselves as top of the heap in the ACC. Again, when DJ was on the field, there were some good things against Furman. Running the ball, still not probably to the level you want to see. But again, the offensive line with, three, the center, right guard, right tackle, three players in new positions, and then Blake Miller being a true freshman at that right tackle spot. Still some things that have to mesh and come together, but you really want to see it start to come together in this game. And again, going back to what Dabo Swinney was talking about, the defense, have that, intensity about you and really, play the right way, a way that shows you've got yourself locked in, you're serious about this, and you're going to put your, your foot down and really make a statement. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond again, coming out of a poor performance, but also heading into the rest of the season and kind of can make this a little bit of I don't want to say a statement game, because obviously, again, it's Louisiana Tech. It's a game you're supposed to win, but at least make a statement in the way that you play.
And we are talking about the details on the field, but like you mentioned, those close games last year, well, they turned Georgia Tech into a decisive victory on the scoreboard, at least. Furman, 3 scores plus, again, margin of victory there. So that's trending in the right direction, and it's more down to the details of how are they going to stack up against better quality competition? How is the defense going to put it all together, like you said? How's the offense going to sustain and become more consistent? So it'll be interesting to see how this week unfolds, and then the big mystery of what they'll do against Wake Forest, I suppose.
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to that defensive line, and especially, I guess we haven't brought up yet the fact that Xavier Thomas is potentially coming back this week or next week. That adds another edge rusher there. If you can be special in terms of how you affect the quarterback, and if that linebacker core, you brought up Barrett Carter, I mean, the way he's progressed from freshman year to sophomore year, if they can affect the quarterback, stop the run, and kind of, I mean, I think Dabo Swinney said this, I mean, points are the name of the game, and they've held teams to, 12 points and 10 points in the first 2 games. So, I mean, if they are able to average 11 points a game given up on the entire year, they're going to win a national championship. I mean, that's not a huge amount of points they're giving up, but you do want to see, I would say, some more pressure on the quarterback. And it'll be interesting to see if Xavier Thomas can help add to that.
One last question. I know if Daniel was here, he would want to ask about Adam Randall and if you've been able to see him during the offseason practices and what kind of jolt he might be able to give to the offense, depending on the reps he's able to get this week.
Yeah, the thing I remember about Adam Randall is just the first spring practice looking for number 8, because I think Dabo Swinney had said when he signed that, when you see him, when you see him in shoulder pads, it's going to look like Justin Ross put on some weight. And I remember finding number 8 in the first, even just warm up stretch line for spring practice. And I was like, wow, that is a big dude. I mean, he's not as tall as Justin Ross. I mean, I think he's 6'2", a little over that maybe, but he's 230 pounds. I mean, he is just, for a 17, 18-year-old kid, just as rocked up as you can possibly be. And, kind of gives you an idea. His nickname is Baby Julio, after Julio Jones. So just a big physical receiver. And obviously it was a punch in the gut when he got that ACL tear April 1st. But the way he's been able to come back, I mean, he was actually in the first fall practices. He was there. He obviously was limited. He was in a yellow jersey, but he was there doing footwork drills, there with the bungee cord, the trainer holding him back and getting some sprinting in. And then it was really fascinating when Dabo Swinney was telling us about, probably midway through camp that they had, put GPS trackers on all the receivers, and he was running the fastest. Adam Randall, 4-something months out from ACL surgery, is the fastest receiver in the room. So a guy with absolutely special athletic gifts. And they even kind of put out a little bit of a teaser. The Clemson football account did on Twitter. There was a play where he went one-on-one with Toriano Pride Jr., absolutely leapt for a ball, and just, it was a very athletic looking play. And again, this is a guy who tore his ACL 5.5 months ago. So, I mean, the fact he's able to make plays like that shows you that he's probably somebody who can really add something to Clemson's offense. Now, in the first game, I mean, I think Dabo Swinney put it as he's going to be on a pitch count. I don't think he's going to be absolutely full go. And obviously he's going to be in his first college football game ever. It's a little different from practice. So can't get the expectations too high, but if he has these athletic abilities, he's a guy, if DJ Uiagalelei can put it in the right spot, seems like a guy who can win you a jump ball, which, Clemson's somewhat lacked thus far. Is a guy who just can win a one-on-one matchup, either by burning a guy or just absolutely out physicaling them for a football. So it will be interesting to see what Adam Randall adds to the equation. But from everything we've seen in practices and just short snippets on Twitter, definitely a guy with some special gifts.
Well, listen, John, thanks very much. I think we kept you a little longer than we had expected, and some technical difficulties kept Daniel from joining in, but really appreciate you spending your time adding another perspective to the conversation, and hope you'll join us again later on down the year, maybe.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Bill.
Thanks a lot. Well, let's go ahead and get into some of the specifics about Louisiana Tech. They do come in at 1-1. They did lose the opener to Mizzou. Then they beat Stephen F. Austin last week. Their magic number is 52. They gave up that many points in the loss, then they scored that many in the win. Starting quarterback Matthew Downing transferred in this offseason as Sonny Cumbie got the head coaching job from Texas Tech, and that's where Matthew Downing had been playing. Downing's had a rocky start. Most of his attempts came against Mizzou, though. He had 194 yards in that game, along with a touchdown and 3 interceptions. But they've also gotten some play out of redshirt senior Parker McNeil. In his snaps, he's tallied 339 yards and 5 touchdowns against only 1 interception. We just don't know what the opposition was on the field in those games, much like the Cade Klubnik nice showing against Georgia Tech.
We have to find out what Louisiana Tech is. I think we'll find out for our purposes on Saturday night and see what this team is. Dabo talked about they're going to get rid of the ball fast. They are kind of an air raid team, and that's what they like to do. We'll see what that does with the Clemson defense, because the struggles that Clemson's defense had last week were evident. We talked about them in the earlier episode this week about the problems with screens and the quick passing game. Well, that's what Louisiana Tech is going to do. So it will be really, really interesting to see if this defense has grown from last Saturday to this Saturday to handle some of that stuff. Dabo said it was a lack of discipline. He said he wants to see the team play with some pride, some focus, those kinds of things, doing their job and not trying to do somebody else's job. That's going to be a big piece of this game Saturday night on the defensive side for Clemson.
Louisiana Tech has a capable running back, by the way, in Marquise Crosby, 220 yards this season already. Only 23 of them came against Mizzou, though, and he only had 2 catches in those 2 games. So that may limit the interior screen game for Louisiana Tech a little bit, unless they've got some creative things that they want to do, like Matt Canada brought to the table on that infamous loss to Pitt, where you were beaten by a kicker of all names, blew it. Let's talk about Louisiana Tech's defense, and actually we'll let Dabo Swinney sort of introduce the topic there. He's talked about a few of the players that stood out to him. Here's that quote via TigerNet.com.
They've got some all-conference guys returning. starting with one of their safeties there, BJ. I mean, he's an excellent player at number 4. 2 corners came in from with the D coordinator, and they're long, they're tough, they're competitive, they challenge you, they play a lot of man coverage, so this will be a good challenge for our guys. I love their middle linebacker. I think he is a really good football player. He's an all-conference type player for them as well. He's played a ton of ball, but he's one of those guys that you want on your team, man. Just finds the ball, makes plays.
To put some names to the references that Coach Sweeney made there, when he talked about BJ number 4, that is safety BJ Williamson. He mentioned the 2 corners who transferred in. Those would be Miles Brooks and Willie Roberts. Talk about the middle linebacker. His name is Tyler Grubbs. He leads the team with 16 tackles. He also went on to mention the defensive line has about 6 guys who can, quote, get after you. So not a ton of depth beyond that, but 6 guys who he feels the Clemson offensive line definitely has to respect. And again, you can see the rest of that interview at tigernet.com or on their YouTube channel, Clemson TigerNet. Well, to me, the key is simply Clemson not beating Clemson on offense, right? You want to see Uiagalelei do the things we talked about earlier in this episode. You also want to see that offensive line continue to improve, and those wide receivers, I guess the word would be start to improve, huh?
Catch the ball, right? I mean, catch the ball when it's thrown to you. That's your
Receiver.
job, right? Receive the ball. You know, we've seen too many drops. We've seen too many quote unquote 50-50 balls that hit the ground. That has to stop. I've also need to see the offense stop turning the ball over. I know one of the turnovers was Will Taylor. That can't happen on the punt return. The interceptions, a tip ball last week, interception. DJ had a fumble in the first game against Georgia Tech. Let's stop seeing the turnovers. Let's stop seeing those mistakes. And let's see this offense get on a roll. That's what I'm looking for Saturday night at Death Valley.
You talk about game recognizes game, and sometimes game recognizes lack of game, but I would really like to see, as I mentioned on Twitter last week, not allowing the opponent to dictate the level of play out of Clemson. Best is a standard. Do all the things that you're supposed to do as a Clemson football player and not allow yourself to get into bad habits that could potentially carry over into, for the next 5 games are not going to be easy going into that bye week.
We talked about this season kind of allowing this team to find itself before the Wake Forest game. Well, the Wake Forest game is next week, and this team needs to start finding its identity. What is that going to be? We don't know. We'll find out coming up Saturday. Is the defense is it going to be sloppy like it was against Furman, or is it going to be focused and ready and good to go? Is the offense going to have that momentum, have that confidence, or is it going to continue to turn the ball over? Those are things that we won't find out until they play on Saturday. But this is really the last chance before things get serious. And I know that the coaches and the players would say, well, things get serious this weekend. That's fine. We're not coaches and players. We're looking at it from the outside. Things get serious next week against Wake Forest, and they've got to get themselves ready to play for that game, and that starts on Saturday.
Well, there should be a lot of excitement on the field Saturday night. I'll be watching out of one eye while I have another obligation to keep up with. But Daniel, you'll be there keeping us posted if anything major happens.
I'll be at the press box. Can't wait. Looking forward to it. I can't wait to see the new lights and all the improvements to the stadium at night. We saw them last week during the day, but want to see them at night. That's going to be a lot of fun as the Tigers play their first night game at home of the season.
Hope everyone has enjoyed this episode. We are glad you found us, Clemson family. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button, hit that follow button. We'll keep you up to speed every time news happens around Clemson sports. Our homepage has some great resources, and we post kickoff times as they're announced, along with some other resources there that are helpful. Be sure to check that out, clemsonkickoff.com. You can even play all our episodes there. Plus, you'll find all our podcast links too. You can follow us on Twitter at Clemson Kickoff. We're on there all day, every day, either retweeting news as it happens or maybe adding a little bit of a quick hit opinion as well. Until the next episode after the Louisiana Tech game, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.